Welcome to Everyday Tarot, your daily dive into the divine wisdom of the tarot. I'm your host, Camille A. Saunders, and today I'll be talking about the Chariot. Whether you're a seasoned tarot reader or just starting to explore, this podcast offers daily insights, intuitive messages, and practical advice drawn from the cards. Each episode is designed to help you connect with your inner wisdom, find clarity in your decisions, and tap into the energy of the universe. Tune in every day, Monday through Friday, for fresh perspectives and empowering guidance from the tarot as interpreted by me. For announcements today, I'm going to be talking about Patreon. So, the best way to support the podcast right now is to listen daily, rate, review, and to follow or subscribe in your chosen podcast app. The next best way is to check out my new Patreon. Supporting me there will give you early access to upcoming podcast episode topics, digital downloads I've created, and monthly tarot hangouts with me and other listeners. Link will be in the show notes to check that out. And you can always go to my website, CamilleASaunders.com/everydaytarot for all the latest information related to the podcast and to find images of the cards that I pull. So for our main discussion today, I'm going to be talking about the Chariot. And if you didn't already know, we're in season 2 of this podcast. So in the first season, I introduced tarot through talking about oracle versus tarot cards, myths of tarot, how to find a deck, reading for yourself versus others, and much more. In season 2, we're going to be going through the first 13 cards of the major arcana, one per episode. So today I'll be talking about the Chariot. So the Chariot, the number associated with this card is 7. In numerology, 7s are considered an intellectual approach to life, sometimes not being satisfied by simple explanations, wanting to go deep and exploring the mysteries of life. So traits with that are wisdom, intuition, introspection, and being analytical. And I didn't see this for the other numbers, but when I was looking it up, it talked about that 7 is aligned with the Greek goddess Athena and the Roman goddess Minerva. And both of those goddesses are goddesses of war and city protectors, as well as having this like analytical mindedness. It's part of like what's supposed to make them such great goddesses of war is that instead of just being the ones that were going out and physically battling, that they did a lot of strategy and had sort of overarching views of war at the time. All right, so this card, the Chariot, so it's commonly depicted sort of like its name as a horse-drawn chariot. Sometimes there's shields on cards. I would say there's sort of like a wildness that's often depicted. Sometimes there's like a horse neighing. I know I have one deck that uses that. Often there's some sort of movement in the card indicated, and also that there, whatever sort of image is on the card, there's this sort of like strong, powerful willfulness about it. So in some of the decks I have, so in the Goddess of Love tarot deck, it shows a goddess in the middle. There's 2 leopards stationed on either side of their throne that they're sitting on. There's a rose sort of in place of a vulva in the image. There's also a pink rose crowned, like sort of crowned on top of the goddess. And underneath the goddess, sort of like under their feet, almost as like a pillar, at the bottom of the card is a 6-sided star or a hexagram that's also in pink. This deck is very pink roses coated. And one thing that I found interesting in this sort of hexagram is and it talks about this in the description of the card for the deck, is that the Hebrew word for chariot is Merkava, and the Merkava is a vessel of light that can transport the spirit into different realms of existence. So the chariot likewise ushers you into a realm of the goddess with love and authentic self-expression as your guides. And as you'll see as we kind of get into the meanings of the card, I think that's really like a interesting, this transportation, this like moving into different realms, sort of this like learning, education, mysteries of the world. That's all indicated in a lot of the meetings. In my Anima Mundi tarot deck, the chariot is depicted as a ram, which kind of looks like a bighorn sheep kind of animal. In this particular image, it's like a black sheep or ram. And this one, it's like jumping through the air. You sort of see half of it, and its like front legs and its head is down as if it's going to like batter or run into something. Again, sort of like as a battle potentially, right? If you know about this, usually like males or rams with bighorn sheep, they will literally butt heads as a form of figuring out their hierarchy and domination. So that's sort of like what I see in the image of this card. It looks very determined and is sort of like jumping through the air. So there's that movement and action again. It does look strong. I would say, again, you sort of have like a literal, like bullheadedness of the chariot that's depicted. So sort of this like willful, very strong willed. And in another one of my decks, the Ophidia Rosa deck, there's a shield depicted and it's surrounded by flowers. It looks to me, in this deck, they don't speak about exactly what flowers they are, but it looks like a clematis or a clematis flower, which is like it's a vining flower. It's not super like vigorously vining, it's sort of like delicate. It has a lot of petaled, like a lot of petals on the flower, and they're like very pointed. And again, the flowers themselves are pretty delicate, but it's also this like strong shape. And clematis, they sort of twine their self. I guess they don't twine necessarily. They like grab on kind of like a pea tendril does, where it reaches out and then sort of like twists around different things. So it can often climb on like an arbor or a trellis or something. Again, it's not as, it doesn't literally twine, I don't think, which is where it like wraps itself around. I have some bean plants that do that, pole beans, that they like wrap. They go very easily on their own. They wrap themselves around, like twist. Clematis more grab on and then they sort of pull themselves up in that way, but also in this way that like it could go on forever. They can easily climb a large structure. They can grab onto different things. So they're sort of like adaptable and flexible, but also can kind of like dominate or take over like again, like an arch or a trellis or something if you sort of allow them to. So to get into the meanings, which I know I've touched on, but again, if we think of the chariot, a lot of the meanings associated with it are being strong-willed. Again, like you're sort of literally being pulled along by ideas or horses, as is often depicted. And sometimes, right, if you think about it, again, if you're being pulled like in a chariot, with like a, yeah, you're in like a little cart behind a horse, right? Like sometimes there's this aspect of like running away with an idea. Again, sort of this like desire to deep dive mysteries is often indicated in this card. Um, there's like a self-reliance, right? Again, if you're in like a cart behind a horse, like you can kind of go anywhere, right? As long as the horse is willing to pull you there. There's like an energetic, there's often a movement indicated, active, determination. So again, like the ram, the bullheadedness, that strong-willed, a lot of focus. Again, sort of like going in a particular direction. If you think of like pulling on the reins of a horse, like you get to kind of control where they go. There's an aspect of like victory, which I think kind of goes back to the Athena and the Minerva goddess aspect, where there's this sort of like warring element to this, but it's a very like strong aspect of it, of victory. And again, sort of like self control, which if you think again of those like horse reins, like you can right pull back and the horse will stop, or you can let them go, or pull them from side to side, and the horse, again, if it wants to, will follow that. So I'm going to speak to what's in some of the specific decks. In the Anima Mundi deck, again, what's depicted is like a ram sort of charging is what it looks like. And I pulled some quotes from the tarot deck description in that, where it says, your willpower and focus will lead to ultimate success. Take the reins, right, which is what I was talking about. And then that you're in control of your own destiny. So where you lead the horse, right, it will take you. In the Goddess of Love tarot deck, the goddess that I talked about that's depicted, that's sort of sitting on this throne, she has long blonde hair. The goddess depicted as Freya. So Freya is considered the Norse goddess of sexual love. She embodies following the path of the heart and the body deeper into the self. I think I talked about it on another episode, but I recently read the book of Fate Inked in Blood by Danielle L. Jensen. And in this book, it depicts the journey of Freya, um, sort of like as a younger person, and then learning that she is a shield maiden, which is what she's considered in Norse mythology. So it's sort of aligned with this idea of a chariot as a shield, and again, sort of as like a protector, or like, right, again, like a physical way to shield yourself or sort of block or sort of like force or defend something, which again, like one of the decks that I'm going to show has a shield on it. So instead of depicting a ram or like this horse thing, it has a shield. Um, so in this book, Freya in the story like learns to stop following sort of like aspects of like societal rules, or sort of like maybe the path that she thought she was going to go on, and like her own thoughts, and then she chooses to follow her heart and her body. So again, Freya rules over lust, love, and war, and she represents following your individual will and authority in love and in life, which I think is a great representation for this card. So in this particular deck, there's also astrological correspondences for the major arcana cards. So this one is associated with Cancer. So we think of Cancer in the zodiac sign. Cancer is a water sign, so it's watery. It's often like in its emotions. If you think of the season when Cancer zodiac folks are born, it's like in the height of summer in the northern atmosphere. So right around that summer solstice time. So Cancer is also associated with the moon. That's its like planetary correspondence, which is also the moon, at least as a tarot card, is sort of considered this like underworld, shadowy aspect. Again, very much associated with emotions, but sort of like the darker side, I would say. Um, and in one of the descriptions for this card for Freya, Gabby Herstick talks about that Freya is a goddess of the wild, feral, ecstatic experience of love and sex, and the darkness that comes out of this devotion. Um, she speaks about that there's this level of like surrender required. So again, if you think of like a horse-drawn carriage, yes, you can guide the horse, right? And you can try to make it take you where you'd like. You can pull the reins back and forth. But ultimately the horse is in charge, right? Like if they get spooked, you will most likely feel affected and they might stray off course, or they might like take you on a wild ride with them, right? If something were to happen. I think the horse, right, like in this image, like it provides direction, right? Again, like it's pulling you, and that's sort of that like force that's pulling you, or your willpower. Um, she also speaks about another quote that I pulled. The chariot also means trusting the body, self love, and your wildness, which I think I see as a, like this aspect that's often depicted in the image of the card. Like there's this embrace of wildness, freedom, kind of doing what you want, but in this grounded way. Um, and for these cards, there's often an affirmation that goes along with the cards. The affirmation for this one was, I am guided on all planes and all ways by the depths of wild and divine love. And that's again in the Goddess of Love Tarot deck. So I really like that. It's sort of that like the guidance aspect, these like depths, and then also the like love and heart like aspect of really being pulled by like your passions, and what you want to do. So as I spoke about earlier in the Ophidia Rosa deck, it's depicted as a shield, and then again with these sort of like clematis flowers like vining sort of all over it. And in this deck, it doesn't have a super like it's a very brief description for each card. So for this card, there's a quote, or like a sort of like a poetic phrase that says, armed with strong roots and the brightest of blooms, we are the ground, we carry no wounds. So I think with that, again, in thinking of that clematis flower, like it's a very grounded flower. It has to really root into the ground, literally, in order to sort of support all of the upper motion of it to support all these vining aspects of it. I think there's also this piece of like, when we hear the quote, so armed with strong roots and brightest of blooms, we are the ground, we carry no wounds. I feel like it's telling us that like you're fully whole already, right? You have these strong roots. There's also this like blooming, flourishing aspect that you're grounded, but also like almost like you have the ability to heal yourself. Which again, I think of like a shield, right? Is like a protection measure. It allows you to defend yourself. It allows you to, right, plant your feet and sort of have this force against something if someone were trying to hit you or with a sword or anything like that. And it's like anchored in something you care about, right? Which again, if you think about holding up a shield, right, you're going to really care about like that shield and what it's going to provide for you if someone's coming at you. But it also provides this level of focus, which I think is really an aspect of this card, that there is this like very almost like narrow focus. Like you really get to kind of like narrow in on what's important um, with this. So yeah, let's dive in and see what the cards have to say today. And today I'm pulling from my Oracle deck, actually. I only have one. It's the Wild Kuan Yin Oracle. And this edition is the Velvet Goddess edition by Lana Fairchild. And I'll have the link for that in the show notes and on my website. So this one, so it's an oracle deck, so it doesn't have any traditional tarot structure. This particular deck has, I'm pulling up the book here, it has 44 cards, and they're just numbered 1 through 44, and then they all have sort of like a name to them. And this oracle deck comes with like a literal book, like it's like the size of like a chapter book. So I'm going to read bits of it for this card, but definitely not all of it because I think it's about 5, 6 pages long. So the card that I pulled is called, so it's number 21, and it's called The Slave Dances into Freedom. And that's sort of what's depicted on the card. You see a person that looks like they have like maybe like official papers of some sort that either they're handing off to someone or they just received. And they're like, it looks like they're almost like skipping down the street. And they're like low down to the ground, but again, there's sort of this like movement to the person. They have like one of their feet up behind them, and one is like, yeah, it's almost like they're jumping off the ground. And then there's sort of like other people above them on like what looks like almost like a barrier wall of some sort. And they look really happy. They look like they're encouraging this person. They have like a lantern, so almost like a guiding their way. But I'm just going to read a bit of what this card's telling us today. So the slave dances into freedom. It says, I overcome restraint, imprisonment, and conflict with a greater power, that of love. You have been on a path that no longer serves your highest good. Whether you believe you have chosen that path or it seems to have taken on a life of its own, through habit and momentum, the time has come for you to be free from it. I shall free you from the negative influence of even the most persistent struggle or devastating conditions with one simple gesture. Do not be attached to the war you have endured, my beloved wild warrior. It is over by my grace. You are enslaved no longer. It is your time to step forwards. You are granted a free pass by the hand of grace, and a new reality of freedom is yours. Feel no guilt or fear over this. It is your time to dance from slavery into freedom. Others will join you when their time comes. No longer are you required to go into battle. Come join my joyful dance of freedom. So, very interestingly, it has like a lot of themes related to the card we talked about today. I would say there's sort of this like freedom or free will aspect of it. There's like dancing, like this movement. And like I can imagine, right, if again you were like a literal slave, like, and you get freedom, like you're jumping for joy. And that would be very exciting. There's also this like shielding or like war aspect, like do not be attached to the war you have endured, right? It sounds like there's something maybe you've been holding on to or sort of like maybe like right as a shield, like taking with you all the time lately or maybe for a long time. It sounds like it's not really serving you anymore. Again, if we sort of imagine like the aspect of this card of like, okay, maybe you were in a war, right? Your shield is actually like helping you. And then when you're no longer in it anymore, that shield might feel really heavy, right? It's kind of a big thing to carry around. It's cumbersome. It was really helpful to you when there were people maybe actively coming at you or ideas or sort of this like relentless struggle that you were feeling. But I feel like this card is telling us that now, like, you can let that go, right? Like, you can put the shield, maybe just like keep it in your house, right? You can, it's not that you have to like totally throw it out, but you don't need to like carry it anymore. Tuck it in your back pocket, right? Put it in your closet, wherever you can store it. So, right, maybe it doesn't feel safe to totally get rid of it right now, but like what would it mean that you've kind of taken, what would it mean to you that you get to set this burden aside? Right, like it's sort of warning us that if you try to be too attached to like the past or history or the war that you've endured, it's going to be really hard to kind of like find that excitement of freedom or like the lightness that comes with this card of sort of like jumping in the air. And it says others will join you when their time comes, right? Like you're not required to go into this battle and you get to join this joyful dance of freedom. You get to see what's next. You get to just skip along the road out of town, out of where you've been stuck before, and you get to see what's next and what's coming for you. And it sounds like you don't necessarily need to have a plan of what that is, but you need to set aside this sort of burden or struggle or war that you've been, maybe again, sort of like that's been raging for a long time. All right. So yeah, links for the tarot decks and this oracle deck will always be in the show notes and on my website if you'd like to look at them. I always post the cards that I pulled, but I also have information for the decks where you can go purchase them. And then thanks again for joining me today on Everyday Tarot. Just as a reminder, the podcast comes out daily, Monday through Friday for all of 2025. Okay, see you soon. Bye bye.